Hello, and welcome to episode 4 of Carnegie's 5-part webinar series, The Power of Personality, Building a Higher Education Brand That Connects. Today, we're going to be talking about brand activation. My name is Joe Master. I'm the Senior Vice President of Brand Management here at Carnegie. My leading archetypes, and I will share a bit more about this later, are orange, purple, and green. And my archetype persona is the philosophical and creative curator. A bit about me. I started my career as a writer. I'm a writer first and foremost. I spent 5 years in journalism and publishing. I wrote rock and roll and restaurant reviews, wound up in medical publishing before finding my way to higher education, as so many writers did. Spent 13 years in-house at Drexel and Temple Universities in Philadelphia. Spent 3 years, around 3 years now, consulting, and I have been in love with language my entire life. I'd be remiss not to mention that I have an 11-year-old son who is absolutely obsessed with Back to the Future. And if you notice the design on the title slide of this webinar, we're going to be talking a little bit about Back to the Future brand activation. Personality science is at the heart of institutional brand, right? So now at Carnegie, we use personality science and archetyping to build brands as personality. And in this webinar series, my fellow presenters, Tyler Borders, who went first speaking about personality science, Jared Brickman spoke about research, David Vigiano spoke about strategy, myself talking about activation, and next up, Voltaire Santos Miran, who's going to be sharing about brand expression. We're sharing with you our approach at Carnegie, and we believe that people are the point. We call ourselves the human connection company, and it's not platitudinal. It's one of our core values. That's why I'm actually here. We believe that adding in a layer of motivation, understanding a why, is at the heart of building a brand. So, in keeping with the theme of Back to the Future, please note that it is exactly, wow, 5:26. You know what? This is not going to be synchronously shared. So it doesn't matter what time it is, but what does matter is that I'm about to share something that I will come back to in the future of this presentation. By the end of this webinar, if I've done my job right, I will have shared our approach to brand activation and how it links back to personality science without devoting any slides to personality science until the very end after I've given you the takeaways. Let's see if I can pull it off. So today we're going to talk about activation. Let's try to define it. And I'll share how we define it here at Carnegie. Let's talk about what institutions get wrong when they activate their brands, or hint when they fail to activate and just go right to expression. Let's talk about how your team can plan for a brand activation and how you can measure success. And then we'll get to some takeaways. So, what is a brand activation in context? So, if we know that a brand is what an organization stands for in the hearts and minds of the people with whom you're trying to connect, no, it's the why, connecting the who with the why. And we know that personality science underlines how we approach brand here. Then you have first brand research and strategy. This includes your qual, your quant, your competitor analysis, and that's a brand personality definition with these foundational frameworks that we would deliver with you as a brand strategy. This process will be led by the Carnegie team in collaboration with your team, but hopefully in collaboration with your institution, with your team as the keepers of the relationship. And it's both internal and external, although a strategy is always internally focused. Brand activation, I'm going to sit on for a second and go right to brand expression. Because we all know brand expression. We get brand expression. You know what? Most people get brand expression much more than any other part of brand building because it's what you see out in the world. It's the communications, experiences, environmental design, logos, lockups, all the owned and earned media, all the promotion. This process, if you were to partner with us, would be led by us and collaborate with your team. Again, hopefully, though, but in partnership with your whole institution. It's very external focused. Now, the messy middle, and the part that a lot of institutions don't think about, is brand activation. And this is the mobilization and equipping of your internal stakeholders to understand and live the brand. Now, we have a slew of services that we provide at Carnegie, including a brand activation roadmap, which is a great product that we offer. Even with our help, brand activation needs to be led by your internal team, and it needs to engage your internal stakeholders. And it looks different for a large public than it does to a small private, but it's a give and take, and we're here to support you with it. So, a brand activation is the process of bringing a brand to life through a strategic engagement and immersive experiences. Experiences being the operative word. It's the careful, engaging, equipping, and inspiring of internal stakeholders with tools and with training that they can actually use. It's ensuring that internal stakeholders experience the brand first so they can be its ambassadors. It's the process of building that brand equity internally long before executing a plan to express it externally. And it's the most commonly overlooked and misunderstood step in the process. So if a brand is a movie, then it has to be Back to the Future. And if the movie is Back to the Future, then this is the brand strategy, the script. This is actually a picture of the screenplay, co-written by Bob Gale and Robert Zemeckis, arguably one of the best screenplays in the history of cinema. And it was based on this one thought that Bob Gale had. Would I have been friends with my dad if we went to high school together? So he and Robert Zemeckis wrote this. It took 9 months to write. I love this quote from Steven Spielberg, who actually was an executive producer on Back to the Future. I love the middle part. I saw a story where the characters created the plot as opposed to the plot creating the characters. It was almost a perfect storytelling machine. The plot is driven by personality, not the other way around. Same thing with brand. Brand driven by personality, not the other way around. Now, I said that this took 9 months to write, but it actually took 40 drafts and 5 years to research. So let's get into strategy because I believe in understanding activation. We have to understand the other parts to understand what activation is and isn't. So the research that went into this script, the foundational work to identify audience motivations, expectations, competitive landscape. What authentic and distinct story can we tell? That's what we're asking during the research phase. So we're Back to the Future. The Bobs, they actually looked into 1950s and 1980s popular culture, teen slang to make sure they were getting it right. They looked into the scientific plausibility of time travel. They actually studied up on Einstein's theory of relativity and time travel tropes so that when we get to 1.21 gigawatts and the flux capacitor, it makes some semblance of sense. Like I said, there were over 40 drafts and studio feedback. And Steven Spielberg was actually very, very integral to helping to kind of get this script to the place it needed to be. The storyline, that's your mission, vision, values, personality, purpose, pillars, traits, all that need to be expressed. Why does this movie exist? What is the deeper motivating purpose for its characters? Genre and theme. This is your brand positioning. Where does this movie fit in the market? Where does it fit among competitors? And then audiences. What's your segmentation strategy, right? Who's this movie for? Who's this movie not for? And unlike our higher education brands, Back to the Future really is a movie that appeals to so many demographics. And we're not going to be able to pull off what Back to the Future did. This script has been studied internationally in film studies courses and screenwriting courses, in popular culture and sociology classes, in physics and time travel courses, and I studied it in a philosophy course. Now we get into not activation. We're going to skip activation because that's what most institutions do. And we'll go to expression. We'll go to activation last. So this is what brand expression looks like. It's the actors. It's the cinematography. It's the score. It's the visual effects. It's the visual identity for a film. It is the advertising and the promotion. You see here the incredible blue screen technology at the time that netted us the incredible tracks of fire that the DeLorean leaves when it goes back in time. We see the logo for the film, which is iconic now, and some of the incredible merchandising that was done from the film. My son told me I needed to leave the hoverboard in. I know it's from Back to the Future Part 2, and I know that we're all still upset that it didn't work, that there actually wasn't a hoverboard. But what we all know about brand expression is this poster. We can all get the paid promotion part because many of us had this poster on our walls when we were kids. My son has it on his wall right now. So the actors, this is your brand personality and messaging pillars expressed. What is the personality in the movie and its characters? How do the actors interpret the script to convey messaging themes? cinematography, score, visual effects. This is your visual identity, fonts, colors, logo, design elements. How does the movie look and sound? How does it visually and sonically execute on the script? Now, we know in Back to the Future, the industrial light and magic, the wizards behind Star Wars, and so many other cinema gems were involved. We know that the special effects team was led by Kevin Pike, who made that DeLorean such an iconic piece of film history. And we know there was a score by Alan Silvestri, and they also got Huey Lewis to write some original music. All of these things helped make the film what it was. Then advertising. This is the promotion. Own, earn, paid, social. Social didn't exist then, but it does now. Organic and paid campaigns. We all know this part of brand expression. How does the movie attract attention? How does the movie generate buzz externally? With Back to the Future, it cost $10 million to promote the film. That was their budget. The actual production budget was $19 million to give you an idea of how much went into the promotion of the film in 1985. Now, let's go to activation, which is kind of like the messy middle. This is where we talk about casting, rehearsals, and training. This is where we talk about having the right directors, producers, and crew involved, production and editing. So the pictures you see here are a little different. See Michael J. Fox with the crew. You see Robert Zemeckis in black and white directing, and you see some stills from some screen tests for some Hollywood actors who trot out but didn't make the part, who didn't get cast. So casting, rehearsals, and training. Internal training and alignment to ensure your stakeholders understand and embody the brand. This is so important. This is not expression, this is activation. Can we cast the right fit actors to bring the script to life, to express that personality? How do we train our cast to embody the parts? And if something isn't working, we have to pivot. So half of Hollywood auditioned to be in this movie. So many actors auditioned to be Marty McFly. And Michael J. Fox was not the first one to get cast. It was Eric Stoltz. And they filmed for 5 weeks with Eric Stoltz before making the very difficult decision to replace him. This is so important. This is activation. This is the middle. This is when if something needs to change, you're getting the feedback now before you get to expression. Because if you get to expression, it's too late. So producers, directors, and crew, this is your internal brand leadership, ambassadors, brand advocates. How can this team of human beings ensure that the cast and technical leads are able to perform at peak levels? So we know that Back to the Future was successful, not just because the Bobs, Robert Zemeckis and Bob Gale wrote an incredible script. It's because they got Steven Spielberg and Amblin Entertainment involved. It's because they got Neil Canton to sign on as another producer. And they had more than 200 crew members responsible for bringing this film to life. And if you're going to do it right as a university, this is a really, really great analogy because it's going to take that many people to bring it to life. Because for you to express your brand externally, people need to understand and feel something about it internally first, or it won't be authentic. And then we get to production and editing. Internal brand consistency, right? When you get to the editing of film, you're making sure that everything looks and sounds like it was supposed to in the strategy or the script. So does the final product align with the screenwriter's vision? Does the movie look, sound, and feel authentic and engaging? Back to the Future took 5 months to film, and it took half that time just to edit in post-production. Bob Zemeckis said that good directing is good writing and good casting. I say that good branding is good strategy, activation, and expression. I'm not anonymous. I just thought it looked better if I wrote anonymous there. So what do institutions get wrong in when they activate their brands or fail to activate their brands? One, lack of internal buy-in. Faculty, staff, students, alumni, your people need to feel something, an emotional connection to a brand before they can be its champions. And that starts at the onset of research, not expression. So it is essential for the who, that's your stakeholders, to feel a part of the why, that's your brand. So the over-reliance on the brand book. We know you're going to get a brand book, and we know that it's going to be on you to share this brand book. But if you're not thinking about working together with other human beings, and rather than saying, here, do this, but saying, here, let's have a conversation. Do you have any questions? Chances are people aren't going to feel it. And if they don't feel it, they're not going to help. And we need their help because they're your brand advocates, they're your champions. Inconsistent implementation. All brand elements need to be consistent across all platforms, departments, and initiatives. One size fits all messaging. Your messaging needs to be tailored to your audiences internally, not just externally. So be mindful of your brand champions and how they connect to the new brand. Lack of measurement and adaptation. So this is a big one. We have so many KPIs for expression. Well, institutions often fail to implement and track KPIs for internal adoption, engagement, awareness, sentiment. These KPIs can help refine strategies that can actually help with expression. And then the biggest one to me is inauthentic activation activities. So, how you share must be influenced by who you are as an institution. Your brand personality as an institution needs to shine through all you do. I could go on and on about this, but if your institution, like me, is an orange creator, a purple provider, and a green explorer, and you're doing some real silver rebellious kind of activities, it's not going to be authentic. In other words, what institutions get wrong is not having the right leaders to champion the project. And here you see a picture of Bob Zemeckis, Bob Gale, Neil Canton, and Steven Spielberg with Michael J. Fox in the middle. If Steven Spielberg hadn't have been involved, this Back to the Future would have been called Spaceman from Pluto. But he had clout and was able to convince the studio execs to stick with Back to the Future. If he hadn't have done that, I don't think that we'd be having a talk about brand activation and Back to the Future right now. I'd like to think, though, that if Bob Zemeckis is like the VP or the CMO of marketing communications, Steven Spielberg's probably more like the advancement lead. And it's going to take cabinet and it's going to take, staff from all levels, stratified all across the institution to get behind a brand build and launch. What else do institutions get wrong? Not engaging the right stakeholders from the start. There's a picture of the crew of Back to the Future. Hundreds of crew members were involved, including Industrial Light and Magic, to see this vision through. It can't just be on marketing and communications to translate a strategy into activation, into expression. Activation needs to include your internal constituents and they need to feel it because we're human beings and we are emotive creatures. The other thing that institutions get wrong is not pivoting internally to ensure an authentic brand expression. Feel bad for Eric Stoltz. I'm pretty sure he's okay. But think about what would have happened if they didn't make that difficult decision 5 weeks in to say, this is not working. That's why activation is important. This gives you the ability to get feedback before it's too late. So, in other words, going directly from your strategy right to expression. That's mostly what institutions get wrong when it comes to brand activation, is just leaving it out altogether. So how can your team plan for a brand activation? Here's a hint. It's more about creating space for human beings to understand the brand than expressing it internally. I mean, externally. So planning for brand activation. Define your objectives. What emotions and actions should the brand inspire? How can you use your why, your brand's personality, to hone in on purposeful activation experiences that are authentic to your institution? Engage your internal stakeholders early, often. And they're the ones who need to align, excite them, get them involved in actual meaningful ways, not platitudinal ways, not the ways that it's like, here, do this. More like, here, I want your feedback. Use a multi-phased approach. You can build momentum with strategically timed rollout phases. I'm going to talk a little bit in a bit about formal launch events. I'm a big proponent of many smaller events as well as a larger event. You can leverage omni-channel engagement, digital, print, events, social media, everything to reinforce the brand internally first. Think of the testing and insights you'll get from all of this engagement. You just don't want people to tell you, oh, I get it, even though they're like, I have no idea. You want people to feel comfortable coming to you and saying, I'm not quite sure I understand. because that's when you can have a real conversation, a crucial conversation that makes everything better, that allows you to create authentically meaningful experiences. Formal launch events, storytelling campaigns, interactive test points, touch points. These are all opportunities for us to test and learn and then measure and adapt. Use KPIs like engagement, awareness, sentiment to refine your strategies. So here's some key brand activation initiatives. There's so many more that we could look at, but these are just kind of the essentials, right? So having a formal launch event, or as I said, a few events, whatever's authentic to your institution. You might be the kind of institution that's like, we would never do a formal launch event for a brand, in which case, fine. Then what is authentic? Smaller groups, focus groups, workshops. Maybe that's the way to go. This is all a conversation, and it's all ongoing. So host the event in person, live stream it, unveil the new brand identity and messaging. Then training and toolkit preparation. Train all of your people to understand and be ambassadors for the new brand. And training isn't just you talking at people, it's you talking with people and getting their feedback in real time. Then there's the website and social media and storytelling. Yes, we all know these things. This is the lowest hanging fruit. Update the homepage, use hashtags, ask for user generated content internally first. See if you could build up support internally first, because that's a really good indicator that it's going to work externally. And you have these people for free, faculty, staff, students, who will get them pizza. Pizza is the great unifier. Be willing to have a focus group with you. Storytelling, use user generated content and testimonials, incorporate feedback the whole time. And then brand advocacy. Give human beings the tools and resources they need and the help that they need to communicate about the brand effectively. If you plan and execute a successful brand activation, I know I'm talking about internal audiences only, but I have to say, you can create lifelong brand advocates like this guy, my son. Um, this is him on Halloween this past fall. And yes, he was Marty McFly. My son picked up a guitar, not because of his dad. I mean, if I had encouraged it, he wouldn't have done it. It was because of Marty McFly. And the guitar he wanted was a Gibson ES 345 because of Marty McFly. He is a lifelong advocate of a certain brand. So how do you measure success? This is what we're used to. Media impressions, social engagement, web traffic, content. Nope, that's expression. Those are the metrics of expression. This is what we need. Internal brand adoption metrics. Now, there are so many ways this could take. And again, this is customized to your institution. In fact, if I was working with you, this is not something that I would just share with you. We would have to do a workshop exercise so that I could hear from you what will work with your campus. One, brand training completion rates. Are employees and key partners actually completing onboarding and training sessions? You could track this stuff. These are good metrics to have. Brand guidelines usage. What's the frequency of downloading brand guidelines, templates, and toolkits? What percentage of assets that you have to audit to comply with brand standards are actually complying? Internal brand advocacy. You can actually get an internal net promoter score measuring how likely employees or stakeholders are to recommend your brand internally or externally. Employee brand understanding. This is huge. You can focus group or survey your stakeholders to see if they understand brand values, positioning, and voice. And more importantly, if they don't, then you have an opportunity to help and ensure that they do. Brand sentiment among faculty and staff. You can do qualitative feedback from surveys or focus groups on how the brand resonates internally. Because if it's not resonating, that's what activation is for. Because if you get to expression and it's not resonating, then it's too late. Then it's out there, then it's live. Brand engagement metrics, participation rates in brand related events, brand launch events, and workshops. Leadership alignment. Are your senior leaders actually reinforcing brand language? Are they using the language that you've provided? Are they using it in their communications? And if not, why? Stakeholder confidence in brand. You can use surveys and focus groups. People who are there. That's the great thing about a college campus. For free, too. Are they confident in using and representing the brand? Because chances are, if they're not, you have an opportunity to one, help them have confidence in the brand, but also have their feedback inform a stronger brand expression. So here's some final takeaways for you. Brand activation is not a one-time event. It's an ongoing strategy. It begins at the very beginning of the brand building process. You and your leadership are the project's champions. Think about Bob Gale and Bobby Zemeckis and Steven Spielberg. Your internal stakeholders are your crew. That's your industrial light and sound, but also it's, the rest of the crew and your brand ambassadors. Engage them in research, strategy, and activation planning before you get to expression. I promise you, it'll pay in dividends. Activate your brand correctly, and you'll have internal and external champions for life. If you enter a branding initiative solely thinking about expression, you're going to miss the mark. Focus on the people, processes, and platforms first. Those are load bearing things that are essential for your expression to be able to stand tall. And a strong, emotionally resonant brand can connect people in transcendent ways. A brand is an authentic expression of your organization's personality. Your stakeholders aren't just targets to entice, they're expressions of the brand too, especially if you can do it authentically. So, I made a promise. I said I would go back to the future and link to personality science. And I'm going to try to do it right now. In each of these webinars, my colleagues and I have shared our personal psychographic personalities and our three leading archetypes with you. These are my colleagues' archetypes. I mean, sorry, these are my colleagues' assessments. I invite everyone to pick up your phone, pick up the camera, and navigate to this blog post and this QR code here and read Tyler Border's blog post about personality science and our approach to brand at Carnegie. If you read even a little bit and you're following along with these webinars, you're going to see my colleagues' personalities and mine come through in how we share knowledge. And if you followed along so far, let's go. Tyler Borders. Tyler is the charming and confident visionary. He's part of the brain trust behind our approach to personality science. So, of course, he led with assertive blue and forward-thinking yellow and that sophisticated and refined pink. Then Jared Brickman, who led us through a webinar on research, he's the imaginative and an analytical theorist. Notice how he delivered his discussion. That brilliant and transformative yellow, that adventurous and inquisitive green, and that creative and imaginative orange. Then there's David Vigiano, who walked us through strategy. He's the resilient and fearless ringleader. Notice a little bit of that rebellious silver, that assertive blue, and that tenacious maroon, and just how David comes across when he speaks. And next up, just to give you a sneak peek of what's to come, in our next webinar, the brilliant Voltaire Santos Moran, talking about brand expression. You're going to see his enthusiasm, that red entertainer archetype, and his refined, sophisticated, and refined pink archetype, and that supportive and selfless purple ooze through the screen during his webinar. And the last thing I'll say is, as promised, I'm the philosophical and creative curator. That's my persona. And my leading archetypes are that orange drive for self-expression and artistry, that purple drive for compassion and caring for others through support and nurture, and that green drive to uncover the unknown. It's my adventurous nature, I guess, right? I seek novel and creative ways of doing things, right? And that's exactly how brand activation needs to work. It has to align with the personality of your institution, not just demographic groups. It has to be built on experiences that link back to your brand's personality. How you express has to be informed by why you're here, who you are, and why you feel the urge to share this knowledge. It has to be built on experiences that link back to your brand's personality. So don't forget, Voltaire's webinar on brand expression is now up next in the series. Pay special attention on how he presents because it's going to be so on brand. Thank you so much. Here's my email address. I'd love to geek out with you about brand and especially activation. Thank you so much for joining me.